Why won't he just listen? You have asked 3 times. The toys are still on the floor. The shoes are still not on. And something in you, something you did not even know was there, snaps. Not a little, not gently. It snaps. And the words that leave your mouth are not the ones you planned. They are sharper, louder, older. They sound like someone you promised yourself you would never become. And afterwards, in the silence that follows, the thought arrives, quietly, like it was waiting. Why won't he just listen? But here is what I need you to consider. What if that is the wrong question? What if the reason he is not responding has nothing to do with defiance and everything to do with design? What if the answer is not in what he is doing, but in who he is? Because here is what child psychology, neuroscience, and 70 years of developmental research are converging on. And most parents have never heard it. Every child arrives with a blueprint, and most of us were never taught to read it. This is the science of child design, and it is going to change how you see the child sitting in front of you tonight. We live in an age of parenting advice. Thousands of books, hundreds of podcasts, endless reels telling you what to say, when to say it, how many warnings to give, and what the perfect consequence looks like. And yet, most parents still feel stuck, still reactive, still guilty, still exhausted. Why? Because almost all of that advice starts in the same place, the behavior. How do I stop this? How do I fix that? What do I do when he... But here's the problem no one talks about. Behavior is never where the story starts. Behavior is the last chapter. The real story, the one that explains everything, begins much earlier. In the way your child's brain processes the world, in his temperament, in his neurological design. Think about it this way. When an architect receives a blueprint, they do not start building and then wonder why the rooms feel wrong. They study the design first. They understand the structure before they touch a single wall. But most parents are building without ever having seen the blueprint. And the quiet tragedy, the one that unfolds in millions of homes, including homes where there is love, where there is effort, where the parents are genuinely trying, is this. A child you do not truly know will eventually become an adult you cannot reach. Let that land, because that is not a failure of love. It is a failure of understanding. And understanding is exactly what we are about to build. So, what does it actually mean for a child to have a design? For a long time, psychology assumed children were essentially blank, shaped entirely by environment, experience, and parenting. If a child were difficult, it was because the parent was doing something wrong. If a child was anxious, it was because the home was unstable. If a child was explosive, it was because discipline had failed. But in 1956, something changed. Two psychiatrists, Alexander Thomas and Stella, launched what would become one of the longest-running studies in developmental psychology. It was called the New York Longitudinal Study. And over the next 3 decades, they followed 133 children from infancy into adulthood, tracking everything. How each child responded to new people, how they handled frustration, how they adapted to change, how intensely they felt joy and grief and anger. What Thomas and Chess found was both simple and world-changing. Children are not blank slates. They never were. Every child is born with stable, observable neurological tendencies, patterns so consistent that the child who struggled with change at 6 months was still struggling with transitions at age 7. The child who was intensely joyful as a baby brought that same intensity to everything: love, grief, frustration, play, as they grew. Thomas and Chess identified 9 dimensions of temperament. But more importantly, they found that these dimensions clustered into recognizable profiles, patterns. designs that showed up early and stayed. Your child's design is not a phase, it is a foundation. But here is where the story gets more interesting. In the 1990s, developmental psychologist Mary Rothbart went further. She discovered a trait she named surgency, a neurological combination of high physical activity, spontaneity, and intense positive emotion. Children high in surgency were not just energetic. Their brains were literally built for movement and novelty. Their restlessness was not a behavior problem. It was a neurological signature. Then, in 1995, researchers Avshalom Caspi and Phil Silva published a landmark study from New Zealand, following over 1,000 children from age 3 into adulthood. And what they found confirmed what Thomas and Chess had begun decades earlier. Children's temperament profiles, observable as early as age 3, predicted their adult personality, relationships, and emotional well-being decades later. 5 profiles. Consistently. The research kept arriving at 5, and then came Dr. Elaine Aron, a research psychologist who identified that 15 to 20% of all children are born with a nervous system that processes sensory and emotional information more deeply than their peers. She called them highly sensitive, not fragile, not broken, deeply perceptive, designed for depth. Finally, Dr. Daniel Siegel, clinical professor of psychiatry at UCLA and author of The Whole Brain Child, brought all of this together through the lens of modern neuroscience. Siegel showed that every child's brain is structured uniquely, and that understanding that structure, rather than fighting it, is the single most important foundation of effective parenting. Now, drawing on all of this research, from Thomas and Chess to Rothbart to Aron to Siegel to Greene, 5 core child design types emerge. These are not clinical diagnoses. They are not fixed labels. They are practical lenses built on 70 years of developmental science to help you see your child more clearly. There are 5 core child design types, and as I describe each one, I want you to do something. I want you to think about your child, not who you wish he were, not who he is on his best day, who he actually is at his core when no one is watching, because I think you will recognize him immediately. The first is the leading child. In Thomas and Chess's research, this child maps onto what they called the feisty profile, high intensity, slow to adapt, persistent, and unshakably strong in their opinions. In Ross Greene's work on the explosive child, this is the child whose behavior escalates precisely when their sense of autonomy is overridden without explanation. Not because they want to fight, but because their nervous system is built for agency, for self-direction, for leading, not following. This child is bold, determined, strong-willed. They push back, they test limits, not out of defiance, but because their design is built for leadership. They need to know why before they follow. They need to feel respected, not just managed. They need to sense that you see their strength, even when that strength is inconvenient. The temptation is to break them, to mistake their fire for rebellion, to punish the pushback until they stop. But the truth is, history's greatest leaders were once called the most difficult children in the room. Watch for pushback on authority, strong opinions, persistence that outlasts your patience, confidence in unfamiliar situations, and a very low tolerance for what feels unjust or unexplained. The second is the exploring child. This is Rothbart's surgent child. High in activity, high in novelty seeking, high in the kind of positive excitement about the world that makes sitting still feel like a prison sentence. Their brain is, quite literally, driven toward movement and discovery. Sitting in a chair for 40 minutes is not disobedience. It is neurological friction between their design and an environment that was not built for them. This child is energy in human form. Adventurous, spontaneous, creative. They do not sit still, not because something is wrong with them, but because their brain is designed for exploration, for movement, for novelty. The temptation is to contain them, to medicate the wonder out of them, to see the restlessness as a disorder before seeing it as a design. But the truth is, properly channeled, their energy becomes innovation, becomes art, becomes the kind of aliveness the world deeply needs but rarely knows how to hold. Therefore, watch for high physical activity, restlessness in structured settings, curiosity about everything, difficulty completing one task before starting another, and a brightness that fills whatever room they enter. The third is the feeling child. Dr. Elaine Aron's research gives us the most scientifically detailed portrait of this child. Present in 15 to 20% of the population, the feeling child has a nervous system that processes sensory and emotional information more deeply than others. They notice the subtleties. They feel the undercurrents. They are moved by things, music, stories, the sadness on a stranger's face, that others walk past without registering. This child feels everything, deeply. They cry at things that seem small. They notice when you are upset before you have said a word. They connect fiercely and hurt deeply. The temptation is to tell them they are too sensitive, to tell them to toughen up, to treat their depth as a weakness that needs to be managed. But the truth is, they are designed for deep human connection. That sensitivity, properly guided, becomes extraordinary empathy. It becomes the kind of presence that heals people. It becomes a gift the world desperately needs and rarely values early enough. Thus, watch for strong emotional reactions to seemingly small events, acute awareness of others' feelings, sensitivity to noise, texture, or atmosphere, difficulty transitioning when overwhelmed, and a depth of care for other people that is unusual for their age. And then there are two more, and these might be the ones that surprise you most because they are the quietest, the most easily missed. Yes, the fourth is the thinking child. In the Caspi and Silva framework, this child resembles what they called the over-controlled temperament. Internally focused, highly observant, processing everything before responding. They are not slow, they are thorough, the world moves fast, their brain moves deep. This child asks why about everything. They take things apart to understand how they work. They are systematic, analytical, and precise. Vague instructions frustrate them, not because they are being difficult, but because their mind requires clarity the way other children require warmth. The temptation is to call them argumentative, stubborn, too much, but the truth is, they are designed for precision, for systems, for solving problems that others cannot even see yet. The child who exhausts you with questions today may one day build something the world cannot live without. So watch for constant questioning, fascination with how things work, a strong preference for structure and clear expectations, discomfort with ambiguity, and a frustration with inconsistency that looks like defiance but is actually a deep, relentless need for logic. And the fifth is the connecting child. In Thomas and Chess's original research, this child resembles what they called the easy child. High in positive mood, adaptable, socially warm, and naturally attuned to the people around them. But do not let the word easy mislead you. This child is not easy because they have fewer needs. They are relationally complex in ways that get overlooked precisely because they do not demand attention through conflict. Their distress is quiet. Their needs are invisible. And because they seem fine, they are often the last to be checked on. This child lights up a room. They make others feel seen. They include. They encourage. They sense the mood before anyone speaks. They thrive in community and wither, truly wither, in isolation. The temptation is to overlook them because they are not the loud problem. But the truth is, their gift of connection is one of the rarest and most powerful things a human being can carry. Families are healed by people like this. So are communities. So are workplaces. So are nations. Hence, watch for friendships formed quickly and deeply, sensitivity to group dynamics, discomfort when alone for too long, a natural role as the peacemaker or encourager, and a quiet distress that goes unnoticed because it is expressed through withdrawal rather than explosion. 5 design types, 70 years of research, 5 completely different children, 5 completely different ways of moving through the world, and one critical question. The only question that matters today, that every parent needs to answer, is this: which one is mine? Now, here's the part no one talks about. You may have just recognized your child in one of those 5 descriptions. You may have felt something shift, but recognition is not the same as knowing. And the painful reality, the one most parenting books do not say out loud, is this: most of us are parenting a child we have not truly studied. We are reacting to their behavior without understanding the design underneath it. We are correcting without first connecting. We are managing the surface while the real child is standing just beneath it, unseen. And there is a reason for that. No one ever taught us to observe our children the way a scientist observes a phenomenon, with curiosity instead of judgment, with patience instead of panic, with the assumption that there is something worth understanding, even in the behavior that makes us want to scream. We were taught to manage behaviors, not to study or read a child's designs. And so we find ourselves in a loop. Your child acts out. You react. Child escalates. You feel guilty. You promise to do better tomorrow. Tomorrow comes. The same thing happens. Nothing changes. Dr. Ross Greene, child psychologist and author of The Explosive Child, spent decades studying children whose behavior was labeled defiant, manipulative, and attention-seeking. What he consistently found was something far simpler and far more important. These children were not bad. They were stuck. They lacked specific skills, flexibility, frustration tolerance, the ability to solve problems collaboratively. And nobody was teaching them those skills because everyone was too busy punishing the behavior. Greene puts it in 5 words that change everything. Children do well if they can, not if they want to. If they can, what looks like defiance is almost always distress. What looks like laziness is almost always overwhelm. What looks like manipulation is almost always an unmet need that the child does not have the language to express. But, and this is the crucial part, you can only see that when you know your child, when you have studied him, when you have learned to read the design underneath the behavior. Because correction addresses what a child did, behavior. But who a child believes they are, identity, that determines everything they will do next, destiny. But here is what I want you to hear, because this is the most important part of everything I have said. This is not a story about what you have been doing wrong. This is a story about what becomes possible when you finally learn to read your child. So what does that actually look like? In practice, in real life, on a Tuesday when you are exhausted and your patience is already gone by noon. It starts with one thing: observation. Not observation as judgment, not watching your child to catch what he is doing wrong, but observation as study, as presence, as love in action. Dr. Daniel Siegel's research on what he calls reflective parenting gives us the science behind this. He found that parents who regularly take time to reflect, not on what their child did, but on what their child might be feeling, needing, or communicating underneath the behavior, raise children who are measurably more securely attached, more emotionally regulated, and more resilient under stress. And the key word in that finding is not perfectly. It is not extensively. It is regularly, consistently, even briefly, even imperfectly. It is asking, Every single day, 5 quiet questions. What did I notice about my child today? What did he do? What did he say? What did he feel? And what does all of that tell me about who he is becoming? You see, that last question, who is this child becoming, is the most important question you will ever ask as a parent. Not, is he behaving? Not, is he performing? Not, is he meeting milestones? But who is he becoming? Under my care, in my home, with my words and my silence, shaping him every single day. This kind of observation does not require hours. Research shows that even 5 minutes of intentional daily reflection begins to change how a parent sees their child. And perhaps more importantly, it changes how the child experiences being seen, because that is very key. 5 minutes in the morning to set your intention. What will I pay attention to today? One moment, just one, in the middle of the day to notice something specific. 5 minutes in the evening to reflect. What did I learn? What would I do differently? What did I see that I want to remember? That is it. Done consistently, done with curiosity and without judgment, this practice reveals something extraordinary over time. Patterns emerge, strengths surface, the design becomes visible. And the parent who once felt reactive, confused, and guilty begins to feel something else entirely. Clarity, connection, confidence, not because your child suddenly became easier, but because you finally learned to read him. Every child arrives with a blueprint, not a blank slate, not a problem to be managed, not a behavior chart waiting to be filled. A design, specific, intentional, theirs. And every parent, no matter how many times you have raised your voice when you meant to whisper, no matter how many bedtimes have ended in tears, no matter how far you feel from the parent you want to be, has the capacity to learn to read it. That is the work, not perfect parenting. There is no such thing. Attentive parenting, intentional parenting. The kind of parenting that says to your child, not once, but daily, with your eyes and your presence and your willingness to keep trying, I see you. I am learning you. You are worth knowing. 70 years of research says the same thing in different words, from different countries, in different languages. Your child came to you with a design. Temperament is real. Neurology is real. And the parent who learns to work with that design, instead of against it, changes the entire trajectory of a child's life. The first step is not complicated. It is this: observe, slow down, pay attention. Ask the question that changes everything. What did I notice about my child today? And what does that tell me about who this child is becoming? If you want a practical starting point, a structured way to do this for 90 days, I created the Child Blueprint Tracker. It is a daily, weekly, and monthly observation journal designed specifically for this practice. And I have also made a free 7-day yelling detox plan to help you begin building calm right now. Both links are in the description. And if this video made you think differently about your child, even just a little, like and subscribe. Tonight, when you see your child, look at him differently, not through the lens of what he did today, but through the lens of who he is. So, keep watching, keep observing, keep believing. Your child is not a problem to be solved, but a person to be known.